Continuing our prospect rankings, we've got the top shortstops in minor league baseball. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is made possible by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So as we've been doing for pretty much since the season ended, we've been going through all the different positions and talking about ranking the top players at each position. And for shortstop, we have to remind everybody, because if not, it's going to come up, that we are trying to upfront account for eventual position changes. Jackson Holliday is depending on who you ask, the number one or number two prospect in all of baseball, but I'll remind you and refer you back to the top second baseman show. We talked about him being a second baseman versus being a shortstop. That's not a guarantee that he will not be able to stick at shortstop, but from where we sit right now, Jackson Holliday absolutely could start in the major leagues in 2024 as a second baseman for the Baltimore Orioles. And so we have to move past him and look at the top shortstops. And I think the conversation on top shortstop prospect in minor league baseball begins with Jordan Lawler of the Arizona Diamondbacks versus Jackson Merrill of the San Diego Padres. And both of these guys have things in their favor. Both of these guys have things that you can mark them down for a little bit. And there are some questions on both of them. But I think it's fair to say this is your one and your two. And as of right now, mostly because of proximity and because of floor, I think I have Jordan Lawler as the number one. Reminder of what he did. 105 games last year between AA and AAA, and most of that was in AA. 278, 378, 496 is the slash line for Jordan Lawler. 20 home runs, 47 extra base hits, 56 walks to 101 strikeouts, and 36 of 41 on stolen bases. So started at Amarillo, moves up to AAA, gets a late season call up like down the stretch. They're in a pennant race. They're trying to make the postseason. Obviously, they came in with the very last seed, went all the way to the World Series. Jordan Lawler's introduction to MLB didn't actually go that well. He played in 14 games in the regular season. 4 of 31, 2 walks, 11 strikeouts, 1 for 2 on stolen bases. So didn't do well against major league pitching, but don't let that color you on your analysis and your impression of Jordan Lawler as a baseball player. What I really liked when I watched him last year is you saw how he improved year over year, and you could see what he did really well. So it feels like he got better with hitting the ball hard. He got better with elevating the ball from 22 to 23. So his ground ball rate goes down. His fly ball and line drive rate went up. His hard hit rate goes up, which means obviously his barrel rate goes up. Because you'll remember, hard hit rate is 95 miles an hour or higher on exit velocity. Barrel rate is the combination of exit velocity and launch angle that is conducive to hitting home runs. It feels like he did struggle a little bit against right-handed pitching, which is the predominant pitching you'll face in the major leagues. So a little bit of a struggle there. Did sometimes have some issues with breaking balls. So again, another things to work on still, right? He is not a finished product. But you saw that the speed absolutely helps him both on defense and on base running. Strong arm, all that. So speed, I would say it's probably a 70 grade. Again, he was 36 of 41 on stolen bases last year. He is 76 of 87 in his career on stolen bases, if I did that math right. It's legitimate 70 grade speed. The arm is legitimately a plus speed, or a plus arm strength. And Jordan Lawler did really well with some of the fundamentals at defense. And we've talked about defense gets better as you rise through the minor leagues. And we saw that from Jordan Lawler. The fact he made the postseason roster, despite having not really hit that well, tells you that they are comfortable with what he can do. I think his hit tool's better than his power tool. I still think his power is at least going to be average to above average. But Jordan Lawler's a guy that is going to be able to give you a high floor of defense. I'm not going to say he's going to win a Gold Glove in his first year, but he's going to easily be an above average defender at the major league level. He's going to be able to give you plenty of line drives, going to give you extra base hits, and he's going to work into home run power. I still think the best, your best you're going to see is probably 20 home run power for Jordan Lawler, but if everything goes right, I could see 2020. As much as Arizona runs, I could see 2030 in Jordan Lawler's future. The big question is going into 2024, does he go back to AAA for more experience? Or is it something where either he or Geraldo Perdomo shift to third base so that Jordan Lawler can get into the lineup sooner rather than later? When we contrast that with Jackson Merrill, you have a guy that produced not as good in the minor leagues last year, but I think the ceiling from a power perspective is better for Jackson Merrill, and the defense is probably, at best, it's going to be equivalent, but you're looking at an offensive first option at shortstop. So 114 games for Jackson Merrill between High A and Double A. And this was his age 20 season, so a little bit younger. Important to remember that. But 114 games, 68 in High A Fort Wayne, 46 in Double A San Antonio. 277, 326, 444. 15 home runs, 44 extra base hits, 35 walks to 62 strikeouts, and 15 of 19 on stolen bases. Some of the big takeaways from watching these two guys as I was trying to figure out the right order to put them in is the speed is not nearly as big of a part of the game of Jackson Merrill as it is for Jordan Lawler. You saw him 15 and 19 on stolen bases. You can see his range at shortstop comes from a really good first steps, a really good reads, short area quickness more so than just actual top end speed, right? He's probably not any faster than average, but he's going to be an above average defender because it goes back. We talk about hitters are born, not made. I feel like Jackson Merrill's defenders are like that too at shortstop. And it feels like Jackson Merrill's one of those guys that absolutely gets it. When you watch him offensively, obviously a lefty, he does really well handling lefties, which is not something from a lot of young players. He does really well handling off-speed pitches, which I feel like is also not something you see a lot of young guys do really well. And I think the power potential here is probably plus. I think Jackson Merrill, if everything broke right, he could be a 30 home run guy. I think he can stick it short. You may end up moving him to third base if you have a better defender. He is 6'3", 195, depending on how the physical development goes. Jackson Merrill may need to move to third base just based on that factor, and you'll probably find someone in your system that is a better defender at shortstop than him. Again, I think he'll be above average, but I don't think he's going to be a plus defender at short. And so depending on the size and all of that, what the big league roster looks like when he's finally up, which I think could be as soon as the tail end of 2024, depending on how things go. His time in Double A San Antonio ended a little bit early. He had a hamstring issue. And so depending on what 2024 looks like, depending on, again, at the major league level, depending on injuries, all of that stuff, you could see him up as soon as the back end of next year. And I think that, again, it's the ultimate future power potential. You won't see it next year, but the eventual power potential feels like it could be a 30 home run kind of bat. Jackson Merrill reminds me, this is not a comp, we don't do comps, reminds me of a guy with an offensive potential like a Corey Seager. Obviously, Seager's approach is second to none, but as far as the ability to hit for power, be a little bit of a bigger guy, still play shortstop, I can see the comparison there. In just a minute, I want to talk about two different shortstops that both dealt with injury last year and both have questions about their eventual fit on the diamond. We'll talk about that next, right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is winding up. We're getting to the postseason, and so right now is a great time to go get some bonus bets from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if the team that you bet on wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, it's a great time to get in on that action. You can use the NFL, the final week of the season, to secure your bonus bets, and then you can go out there and look at all of the odds. The World Series odds, constantly updating. They have Cy Young odds up. They have MVP odds up. They do not yet have Rookie of the Year odds. That's the show that we're waiting to drop once they get the Rookie of the Year odds up, but they have everything else. So go to FanDuel, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, use the NFL season to win some free bets with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, so we're looking at shortstops, top shortstop prospects, and there's two guys here in this next segment that both dealt with injuries in 2023, and so there's some lingering questions about what's going to happen to them. And it's Marcelo Meyer of the Boston Red Sox, Colson Montgomery of the Chicago White Sox. If your team ends in Sox, your shortstops probably got hurt last year. Colson Montgomery had a back sprain, really caused him some issues. Marcelo Meyer dealt with a shoulder injury that he tried to push through, and it really ruined a lot of his numbers and ruined a lot of his stuff. And so his stat line doesn't look nearly as good. So I've got Montgomery above Meyer. Some of that is proximity. When it's down, I think they're both very interesting players, but because of proximity, I have Montgomery at 3 and Meyer at 4. So Colson Montgomery, the White Sox, 64 games last year between high A, double A, and a little bit of time in rookie ball rehabbing the injury. 287, 456, 484, 8 home runs, 25 extra base hits, 56 walks to 56 strikeouts, and 2 of 5 on stolen bases. You can see, obviously, very strong on-base ability from Colson Montgomery. The thing that stands out to me, though, when I've watched Colson Montgomery, one, defensively, he's answered a lot of the questions about, is he going to have to move to third base? He is a little bit of a bigger guy as well. 6'3", 205 is what he's listed at as of the end of last season. But someone who has gotten to the point of, yes, he can stick at shortstop. He'll probably be an above average shortstop. The arm is somewhere between above average and plus, depends on how much he can get into it. He can really get behind it when he needs to, but he doesn't always do it. The thing that's gonna, if anything, holds Colson Montgomery back at shortstop, it's going to be the range. He doesn't have the greatest foot speed, and you can see that in the stolen base numbers too. He's not a stolen base guy. The range that he has is he takes long strides, he has good reads off the bat, and he has good positioning. So that's a lot of he makes the defense work there. He's a good athlete as well when he's not dealing with a back injury, obviously. And the speed, the lack of speed mainly shows up on getting to first base. He's just below average speed-wise there, and it shows up on lack of stolen bases. He can go first to third on a base hit. He can score from second on a base hit, all that kind of stuff. It's just beating a ball down the line to first and then stealing bases where the speed doesn't really show up. But what I like for Colson Montgomery. It's a really simple swing when he stays in his approach. Sometimes he gets a little pull happy and tries to launch home runs, but for the most part, it's very good strike zone discipline. And when the ball is in the zone, he can make good contact and he can send it to just about any field. We saw him go to the Arizona Fall League to make up some reps. I'm not sure what they do with him in 2024 to open the season. It feels like he's probably going to AAA Charlotte. I would have, right when the season ended, I would have assumed he's probably your opening day shortstop, but they made a big trade with the Atlanta Braves, shipped out Aaron Bummer, and got 5 players back, including Nicky Lopez, who can play a perfectly fine shortstop. He's a very good defender, even if offensively he doesn't give you much. And so they have options at shortstop if Colson Montgomery needs to spend a little more time in AAA showing he's healthy and showing that he's ready to hit at the major league level. So got Colson Montgomery third on this list. And then behind him is where we have Marcelo Meyer. Again, something where he tried to play through a shoulder injury. It was on May 7th, right? And the slash line before and after, you can see how the injury messed with him. Before May 7th, Marcelo Meyer's batting .337, .414, .582. He's striking out 21% of the time. His contact rate, overall contact rate's around 75%. After the shoulder injury, 190, 253, 366. Strikeout rate goes up about 5% to 26%. Contact rate comes down to just over 71%. Another guy that isn't necessarily an amazing defender, but I'd probably call him plus. I think he's a better defender than Colson Montgomery is. The arm is a pure plus arm, and so that definitely helps. Another situation where he's not incredibly fast, right? He gets where he gets to because of good first steps, good reactions, longer strides. I want to say he's 6'2" or so, not as big as Montgomery, but still some longer legs. And then the hands are really good, the transfer, the arm is accurate, all of that. And so he makes shortstop work. If he ends up having to outgrow shortstop, I think he could be a plus defender at third base. Obviously, you've got somebody in Boston that plays third base right now. We'll see what happens there. But offensively, it's really hard to parse out what is the true Marcelo Meyer because of trying to play through the injury. He was chasing a lot more. He had more swing and miss. But again, I think a lot of that is because of the injury. If you look at before all of that, you can see really good ability to make contact in the zone. It's a really quick swing into the zone. The setup's really simple, and he plenty of bat speed. The exit velocities are good, and he can send the ball. He can hit the ball to all fields. He doesn't have a ton of power when he goes opposite field, but he can still hit the ball to all fields. His 90th percentile exit velo in 23, I think it was before the injury, was 105. So you feel good about that. Again, the contact rate, it was like 68% overall in 22. It was 78% in 23. Again, accounting for when he got injured and trying to play through it and things like that. Does not feel like an option for 2024. Going to start at Portland, so AA. Now, if he just absolutely rakes when he gets into at Portland, you could possibly see him up by the back half of the season. It's something where the Red Sox internally are very high, obviously, on Marcelo Meyer. He's either him or Roman Anthony's your top prospect, depending on who you ask and whatever day it might be. And so I could see them, depending on if they have issues at shortstop, depending on what the team's doing, depending on how well he's doing, I could see them rushing him to the majors, but I don't expect him to. It would be definitely the second half of the year before I think you would see Marcelo Meyer up. But a guy, provided that he's healthy, and again, that is a question. He had surgery. I want to say he had surgery in August, or maybe it's just rest and rehab, but I know he got a cortisone shot in like September, which is never reassuring. So the whole big thing here is he needs to be healthy, and then he needs to produce in AA Portland next year. In just a minute, let's talk about two former pitchers who use that arm to great effect at shortstop. We'll do that next, right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. Final segment of the shortstop rankings here for winter 2023. Before we get into the last couple guys here, reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows like this one covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Okay, so looking at the final few shortstops, it's two guys that in high school were two-way players, and a lot of teams like them better as pitchers than as hitters. Carson Williams of the Tampa Bay Rays and Winn of the St. Louis Cardinals. I've got Williams above Winn, and Winn has the better arm. Carson Williams, it's probably a 70 grade arm, right? He can absolutely fire it in. Winn has probably the best non-pitching arm in the entire minors. You'll remember the 2022 Futures game. He threw a ball from shortstop to first base at 100.5 miles an hour. Justin Turner was so mad about it and didn't even know the context that, hey buddy, it's an exhibition. Somebody bet him he couldn't do it. But the thing for Carson Williams, and the reason I have him at 5 versus at 6 behind Winn, is Carson Williams, I think, is probably the best defensive shortstop in the minors. This is not my Tampa Bay Rays or Montgomery Biscuits bias. He was not in Double-A Montgomery when I called that week of games. I just think Carson Williams is an amazing defender. I've watched him, whether it's Bowling Green, different places, whether it's Charleston, wherever it may have been. I'm just very impressed with what he can do. So 115 games last year between high A and Double A mostly. He got a little bit of time in Triple A because he was the emergency shortstop option at the major league level when they had no idea what was happening to Wander Franco. But in those 115 games for Carson Williams, 258, 356, 497, 23 home runs, 51 extra base hits, 59 walks to 158 strikeouts, 20 of 30 on stolen bases. The power potential, I think, is there. 60 grade is probably where I would put it. He can be a 25 home run guy. Again, the speed is good enough where you can see he was able to contribute on stolen bases. It's above average. And obviously, you can see it in the defense as well. He does. The thing with his offense is he's not a pure hitter, right? Hitters are born, not made. He's not a natural born hitter. He has to work at it. And when you watch, some of it is his mechanics are still a little bit busy. He has a pretty big, like a leg lift kind of thing. And so because of that, it feels like he's not always on time to the ball, and he doesn't quite do everything on rhythm every single at bat. So there's some consistency to work on there. The Baseball America, the comp that they gave for his offensive game is Dansby Swanson. And their quote was a shortstop who doesn't always hit for average, but gets on base at a solid clip and hits for enough power to make an impact. And I think that's a really good encapsulation kind of all around of the style of game of Carson Williams. A very good defender. I'll remind you, Dansby Swanson won a Gold Glove in 2023. I do think Carson Williams has a much better arm than Dansby Swanson has. And then the ability, when he comes into his own offensively, he's going to be streaky. He's going to have strikeout issues, but he's also going to be able to get into one. And from my time watching him, he feels like he's very much a clutch performer. He makes the plays that you need made when you need them made, right? Whether it's a key base hit, whether it's a defensive gem, whatever it might be. He's one of those players that we can't measure clutchness, right? We can't measure the clutch gene, but it feels like Carson Williams has it. Right behind him, Masyn Winn, again, nothing against him. I think he's a very good shortstop. part of this is just, when in doubt, I'm going to defer to the better defender. And I think that Winn's a very good defensive shortstop. Again, I think Carson Williams is the best defensive shortstop in the minors. When you look at what Winn did last year, spent almost the entire year in AAA. 105 games, 288, 359, 474, 18 home runs, 40 extra base hits, 44 walks to 83 strikeouts, 17 and 19 on stolen bases. Did get into the major leagues for just long enough to still maintain rookie eligibility. 37 games, struggled a little bit, 172, 230, 238, 2 home runs, 4 extra base hits, 10 walks to 26 strikeouts, and 2 for 3 on stolen bases. The thing here is he's another guy similar to AJ Smith-Shawver that never focused on just baseball and then never focused on the position he's playing until just the last couple years. And so he is a little bit, there's more development there than a typical guy of this age, I think. And we really saw when they took away the option of potentially still pitching and just kept him solely as a hitter and a position player, we saw him look a lot better in the minors. Contact ability, very good. The swing and miss, especially in the zone, very rarely happens. The issue is deciding when to swing. He doesn't do well against velocity. He doesn't do well against breaking pitches that'll take him out of the zone. A chase pitch, he's going to go after it. And so you've got things to still work on. He also struggles against righties as well. And the underlying power data. We've talked on this show about looking for 90th percentile exit velocity, 101.9 for Masyn Winn, which is just a little bit below. I told you we're looking for 102 average for these guys in the upper minors, 101.9 right there. So at best, it's average power. He does a really good job of maximizing that power that he does have when he makes contact. But again, a pitch out of the zone, a fastball of high velocity, that's where he's going to struggle to make that contact. Speed-wise, he is 17-19 in stolen bases, was 2 of 3 in the majors. He's got plenty of speed, plus speed. And then again, the defense is possible because his arm is so fantastic. It reminds me, and let me be careful how I say this, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Winn's, like all of the other parts that go into being a good defender at shortstop, the transfers, the hands, the first step, all of that is average to maybe above average. But the arm reminds me of watching Andrelton Simmons in his prime, where the arm is so strong and accurate that it can cover a lot of that stuff up. Now, the difference, obviously, is Andrelton Simmons was also elite at all of the other things. And Andrelton Simmons was the package of best defensive shortstop of his generation. Whereas Winn, because he doesn't have all of the other tools, but he has the arm, it allows him to be an above average to plus defender, despite the rest of that stuff just being fine, because the arm is so incredibly good. 2 more guys that we struggled with on this because I don't know where they end up playing. Adael Amador of the Colorado Rockies and Brooks Lee of the Minnesota Twins. Amador, we had him in the second base show because the presence of Ezequiel Tovar means he's going to move to second base. I think that could happen sooner rather than later, and that's nothing against Amador's skill as a shortstop. It's the fact that Tovar is also a very good shortstop and is also at the major league level. Brooks Lee is another interesting conversation because your infield in Minnesota, you have Carlos Correa, you have Royce Lewis. What does Brooks Lee do? Does Brooks Lee move to second base? If he does, what happens to Edward Julian? Where do you move guys around? Brooks Lee is probably close to being able to come up and contribute at the major league level, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Where does he play? That's the big unknown for Brooks Lee. Great week this week. Couple other shows coming up. We're talking to our friends at the Twins. We have to get the best right-handed pitching prospects show in there. I'm going to try to do a New Year's resolutions for each farm system at the end of the week to capitalize on the holiday next week. In the meantime, if you have questions for Monday's mailbag, anything like that for me, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. We also have a link tree in the episode description in the show notes that has every other way to get in touch with us. Discord, email, subtext, whatever it might be. There's also a link to a podcast survey down there. I want to hear from you what you think we can do better in 2024. Until next time, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.